In Lesson 27A, it is called a Minnesota Essential lesson, which means it's added on to our regular everyday math series. So the numbers are a little bit off, and that's why you see the A behind it. So we just did Lesson 213, and now we're moving to 27A, which is all about timelines. You will need a whiteboard, and then you will also need your packet. And the packet had these extra sheets in it because they are not in your math journal. So just be aware, they are not in your math journal. They're in a packet that was stapled together at the Portage Material Pickup. So on your whiteboard, we're going to do 3 warm-up problems. Would you please, on your whiteboard, go ahead and take 4,084 and subtract 2,975 from it. Then for number 2, you're going to write all the factor pairs of 45. We've been writing them mostly as pairs, but remember, when you get the turnaround fact, you know that you have found all the facts. So I'll give you a little clue. This one's a little tricky, so just be careful on that one. And number 3, I want you to write out the multiples of 6 and 8, the first 4. And remember, the first multiple is always the number itself. So you're going to use your multiplication chart as needed. Go ahead and pause the video and complete these 3 problems. Remember to pause the video and do this work with me. Be a trustworthy 4th grader. All right, you should have paused the video and solved these problems. So here we go. 4 minus 5, the larger number needs to be on the top. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to borrow from the 8. I'm going to take those 10 and put it in the front of the 4 to get 14 minus 5 is 9. 7 minus 7 is 0. I cannot take 0 minus 9. The larger number needs to be on the top. So I'm going to borrow from the 4, make it a 3, and put that in front of the 0 to make 10 minus 9 is 1, and 3 minus 2 is 1. 1,109. 4, the factors of 45. Remember, I always start with 1 times itself. I know that 2 is not a factor because it is not an even number. Now, this is the one that's a little tricky. It's not a basic fact, but it still factors. 3 times 15. Let me show you why. 15 plus 15 plus 15 is 45. And then I know 5 times 9 is 45 because anything that ends in a 0 or a 5 will be a factor. Nothing times 6, nothing times 7, nothing times 8. And then guess what? I would have 9 times 5, which you know I go ding, 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 ding. Oh, wow, I found the turnaround fact. I know I now have all of the factors of 45. And number 3, the first 4 multiples of 6 are 6, 12, 18, and 24. Sometimes kids have been writing down 6 times 1 and 6 times 2. These are actually factors. You want to write what is the answer when you actually multiply those numbers. Then we have 8, 16, 24, and 32. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into the lesson for today. So please make sure you find those stapled sheets. And the first one talks about a timeline. A timeline shows important events in chronological order. Now, I noticed 2 things already in this first sentence. I notice that the word timeline is in bold and chronological order. Those must be really important words for me to pay attention to. In fact, the author or the writer of this math series goes on to tell us, which authors often do, they then explain what that means. Chronological order is the order in which events happened. So if I were to look at the start of Portage, I would say, okay, you started school on September 14th. That would be the first event of Portage. And then I might say on September 30th, we did material pickup. And I could go through the events that have happened in the order in which they happened. That's what chronological order means. Kabir and his family visited an amusement park. He created a timeline to remember the highlights of his day. So up at the top, we have his day at the amusement park, and that's the title. That tells us what this information is all about. When I look at this timeline, I look at the first thing. He arrived at the park at 10 o'clock, so that's an important event. Then as we go across the timeline, at 11 o'clock, he rode the Great Bear. At 12:30, he rode Fahrenheit. These must all be roller coasters. And then at 2:30, he rode Roller Soaker. I bet he got wet on that one. At 4:30, he rode Storm Runner. 6 o'clock, he rode Comet. And at 7 p.m., he left the park. So you can see there are gaps of time in between. He wasn't just on one ride. Sometimes it was an hour or two before he was riding another roller coaster. Use the timeline to solve the problems below. I'm on number 1. Write what happened at each time. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this as to not to confuse you. So we're going to look at 4:30. Here's my 4:30 time here. What happened on that time? Well, he rode Storm Runner. So on your sheet, go ahead and write rode Storm Runner. B, what happened at 11 a.m.? Well, here I see 11 a.m. Notice that some things are written below the timeline and some are above. And it's just to space it out so it's easy to read and it's not all crunched together. So at 11 o'clock, he rode Great Bear. And because they're named of specific roller coasters or rides, I actually capitalize them because they're considered proper nouns. Next, when did the following events happen? So now I'm not looking for a name, I'm looking for a time. He left the park. Left the park. What time did that happen? 7 p.m. What time did he ride Roller Soaker? So I'm going to look for the keyword Roller Soaker. 2:30. That way he'd have time to dry it off if he got really wet. We'll continue on the next screen. I still have put the timeline up at the top. Our last ones, remember, you already filled this out, so you don't have to do this. Remember, he left the park at 7 p.m. You already have that down. And he rode the Roller Soaker at 2:30, so you should already have that documented. How long after Kabir arrived at the park did he ride Fahrenheit? So I'm going to look at the time that he arrived at the park. So maybe over on the side here where you have a little bit of room, I'm going to write 10 o'clock to remind me that's the time that he arrived at the park. The next thing I'm going to look for is when he rode Fahrenheit. So I'm looking for Fahrenheit, which is 12:30. So my question is, how many hours? So if I count from 10 to 11 o'clock is an hour, 11 to 12 o'clock is another hour, and from 12 to 12:30 is 30 minutes. So how many hours did later? 2.5. All right, number 4. In number 4, it says, how long before Kabir left the park did he ride Comet? We're looking for before and a couple of keywords, left the park and Comet. So left the park at 7 o'clock and rode Comet. And we want to know how long before. So we have 2 times here. We have 7 o'clock in which he left the park and 6 o'clock that he rode Comet. So how many hours before 7 o'clock is 6 o'clock? How long before Well, the difference between those two numbers is 1 hour. An hour's there, so you can just put 1. We're not going to worry about 5 or 6 for today, so you may move to the next page. Here we're looking at roller coaster timeline. On the left-hand side or on the top of your packet, it says the table below shows roller coasters at Frontier City Amusement Park in Oklahoma. So we have some roller coasters, and the name of it in the first column: Diamondback, Silver Bullet, Steel Lasso, Wild Kitty, and Wildcat. In the next column, we have the type of roller coaster. We have steel and wood roller coasters. And the design: do you sit down or are you suspended and your legs are dangling? And the year that it opened. Looking at number 1, it says mark the approximate location for the year each roller coaster opened on the horizontal timeline below. Above or below each mark, write the name of the roller coaster and the year it opened. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to put a title. What is this information all going to be about? And it's going to be about roller coaster openings. Go ahead and write that on your white sheets. What we will do is I'm going to write some above and some below just to give plenty of space. I'm writing in a much smaller space than you are, so you'll have a little bit easier time than I will on this. We'll take the very first one, Diamondback, 1993. So that's after 1990, but before 1995. So I'm going to say maybe right about here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn my page, and you might want to do this, and I'm going to write going up, and so it's a little bit easier and gives me some more room. So I'm going to put Diamondback. So 1993, and I'll write Diamondback. And again, you will have much better success at writing that than I will. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check this off over here so I know that I did it. The next one is 1986. Well, that's after 1985, but before 1990. In fact, it's pretty much the next year. It is the next year after 1985. So I'm going to put the little dot here, and I'm going to write 1986, and I'm going to write Silver Bullet. If you want to write it the other way, that's great too. Maybe the next one I'll do that way so you'll get to see it that way too. I'm going to mark that one off. Steel Lasso, 2008. 2008 is after 2000, after 2005, and before 2010. So maybe right about here. And here I'll just write, just so you can see it written a different way, I'm going to write 2008. And I'm going to write Steel Lasso. That one sounds like fun. The next one is 2013, so that happened after 2010, so right about, let's say, here, and before 2015, I'm going to write 2013, and I'll write Wild Kitty. And then I'm going to mark that off, and I have one last one left. In 1991, Wildcat was opened. 1991 happened right after 1990. And I'll go ahead and write 1991 Wildcat. Now, I would typically write them all one way or the other, but I wanted to show you some of them I wrote going up, some of them I wrote going across. But you get the idea of putting it in the chronological or correct order in which it occurred. Use the timeline to solve the problems below. A, which roller coaster coasters opened after Diamondback? Notice it says coasters, so my answer is probably going to be more than one. So I'm going to look for Diamondback. So where is Diamondback? Right here. So which are the two that happened after it? Well, it's Steel Lasso. Write this in your little packet. And Wild Kitty. Again, remember, if I go too quickly, feel free to go ahead and pause the video. Next, about how many years before Wildcat opened did Silver Bullet open? So the first thing I'm going to look for is Wildcat. And I'm going to put the year right underneath it so I can compare it. Wildcat was 1991 and Silver Bullet was 1986. So I have to figure out the difference between those two numbers. So you have a little bit of space at the bottom. Remember, the larger number is going to go on top, and we're going to figure out the difference between those two numbers. Sorry, I had a little stray mark there. Let's try that again. 1991 minus 1986. Would you please pause your video and go ahead and subtract the difference between those 2 years? So I cannot take 1 minus 6. I need the larger number on top. So I'm going to borrow from the 9, make it an 8, put that 10 in front of the 1 to make 11. Minus 6 is 5. So there are 5 years between when Wildcat and Silver Bullet opened. C, about how many years has it been since a new roller coaster opened at the park? Sorry, when I touch the bottom of the screen, it keeps jumping. Well, let's find the last one. What was the very last one to open? 2013, right? That's the last time. Well, what year is it right now? It's 2020. So if I take the year that we're in right now, 2020, and I subtract the year, the last one that opened, which was Wild Kitty in 2013, go ahead and subtract. 7 years. Our last page that we'll do together in the video is another roller coaster timeline, but this one is actually talking about Valleyfair, which is in Shakopee, Minnesota. Maybe you've been there. So this timeline just looks a little bit different. It's set up going vertically or up and down. So we have several different rides at Valleyfair. So we have the Corkscrew, Cosmic Coaster, Excalibur, the High Roller, Mad Mouse, Renegade, Steel Venom, and Wild Thing. So all of the names of the rides that they're comparing are along the top. Along the left side, it tells you the type, the design, and the year that it opened. So we're going to do the same thing again, and we're going to mark when each of these roller coasters in Valleyfair opened. So, of course, I need a title. And the title is the dates of roller coaster openings. And yes, these are all correct dates. These are just not made up out of the blue. So this time we start in 1975. So this is the oldest up here. This would be the newest near the bottom. So the first one, I'm going to start with Corkscrew over here. It opened in 1980. So if you notice, it marks every 10 years. So 1975, 85, 95, 2005, 2015. So in between those dates represent 10 years. We have a mark halfway, so this would be about halfway or 5 more years, 5 more years, 5 more years, 5 more years. So be aware of that. So we're going to go ahead 1980. Here's 1975 here. And 1985. And halfway would be 5 years. So that would be right there. We're going to go ahead and put 1980 Corkscrew. again. That's a C. And 1980, I'm going to put there. Checked off. Next one, Cosmic Coaster was 2011. So halfway, this would be 2010. So it's just after that halfway mark. So right after that, I'm going to go ahead and put Cosmic Coaster. And that was 2011. I'm going to mark that one off. The next one is Excalibur, and that was in 1989. 1989. Well, halfway between 1985 and 1995 would be 1990. So just be aware of that. And that happened right before that. Right before that. So we're going to go just before that halfway mark and write Excalibur. EXCALIBUR. And that was in 1989. Next one is High Roller. That is one of the older roller coasters. That is a wood one. And that was 1976. Just after 1975, we're going to write High Roller. It's the one that's in the very back, and it's white. And that was 1976. I'm going to check that one off. The next one is Mad Mouse, 1999. So halfway between 1995 and 2005, this would be 2000. So just before that halfway mark, is Mad Mouse. This one kind of makes me a little bit sick because it's so jerky. 1999. Check. Next one is Renegade. That is also a wood roller coaster, and that was 2007. So just a little bit after 2005. And this is Renegade. 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 2007. One of the newer ones is Steel Venom in 2003. So that comes just before 2005. And I'm actually going to write it on the other side since I'm running out of room. So Steel Venom. And that was 2003. And lastly, Wild Thing was 1996. And that happened just after 1995. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to write it on the left side. Wild Thing. 1996. So those are all of the rides at Valley Fair and when they opened. All right, that we're not going to go ahead with the pumpkin weight frequency. Instead, we're going to do that in small groups. So sorry about the long video today. There was a lot to cover in timelines. Go ahead and check your Schoology folder and see what you need to do. But remember to hold on to this packet for your small group time.